So, what if your greatest weapon wasn't a sword or a spear, but your reputation? Today, we're diving into the absolutely incredible story of Huang Gai, a general whose name literally became a legendary military strategy. And it's all thanks to one of the most audacious, painful, and frankly, brilliant deceptions in all of history. Okay, so picture this. It's the year 208 AD. The warlords of the south, Sun Quan and Liu Bei, are backed into a corner. They are facing a threat that could wipe them off the map. The ridiculously powerful northern chancellor, Cao Cao, is sweeping down the Yangtze River with a navy so enormous it looks like he's about to swallow China whole. For the Southern Alliance, the situation, well, it looks completely unwinnable. And that's the big question, right? When you are hopelessly, ridiculously outnumbered and outgunned, what do you even do? Your usual bag of tricks? Totally useless. You need something completely out of left field, a move your enemy could never, ever see coming. And you can just see here the sheer scale of the problem. We're talking David versus Goliath, if Goliath had a fleet of thousands of ships. But Cao Cao had one big problem. His northern soldiers were not sailors, and they got terribly seasick. So, to fix this, he ordered his warships to be chained together, creating this one massive, stable, floating fortress. It looked absolutely invincible, or so it seemed. But one man saw an opportunity where everyone else saw defeat. The veteran general Huang Gai looked at that floating fortress and saw something else entirely, a giant floating tinderbox. He realized the very chains that made the fleet so stable also made it a death trap. It couldn't maneuver, it couldn't escape. He found the key. Their greatest strength was actually their greatest weakness. So great, use fire. But how do you get close enough to light the fuse? A direct attack would be suicide. And this is where Huang Gai comes up with a plan that is equal parts genius and completely insane. One that would require unbelievable sacrifice and a level of deception that is just mind-boggling.
So you have to understand, Cao Cao was no fool. This guy was notoriously suspicious, always looking for a trick. If some enemy general just sent him a letter saying, "Hey, I want to surrender," he'd laugh and throw it in the fire. No, to get close to that fleet, the defection had to be 100%, undeniably believable. It needed a backstory so dramatic, so painful, that no one would ever question it.
And this is where the plan becomes legendary. Huang Gai volunteered to create that reason himself. The plan was this. He would publicly and deliberately argue with his own commander, Zhao Yu, and as a result, get viciously beaten in front of the entire army. This public humiliation, this real, physical suffering, would be the proof Cao Cao needed. Only then, nursing his wounds, would he send a letter of defection, filled with bitter resentment, and offer to lead his fleet over to Cao Cao's side. But you might be thinking, hold on a second, this doesn't make any sense. Huang Gai wasn't just some random officer. He was one of the most respected, most loyal generals in the entire South. So why on earth would Cao Cao believe a man like that would suddenly turn his back on a lifetime of service? And that right there is the psychological masterpiece of this whole operation. The plan's success didn't just hinge on a fake argument or a real beating. It hinged on the rock-solid reputation of the very man who was willing to endure it all.
To really get it, you have to appreciate the sheer depth of his service. Huang Gai was what they called a veteran of 3 reigns. He fought alongside Sun Jian, the family patriarch who started it all. He helped his son Sun Si carve out a kingdom in the south. And now, he was a foundational pillar for Sun Quan. His loyalty wasn't just a rumor. It was forged in decades of blood, sweat, and unwavering commitment.
And here's the beautiful paradox that makes the whole thing work. The reason Cao Cao bought the story is precisely because no one could ever imagine Huang Gai being disloyal. A betrayal from him would be so shocking, so utterly out of character after a lifetime of devotion that it just had to be real. Ironically, his greatest weapon of deception was his reputation for absolute integrity. But here's the thing about Huang Gai. The crazy fire attack at Red Cliffs, that wasn't even the whole story. His genius wasn't limited to a single desperate gamble. He was a man of remarkable and really diverse talents, which became crystal clear in the years that followed that famous battle. After the dust settled from that massive victory, Huang Gai was sent to govern some of the most unruly, rebellious territories in the south. And it's here that he proved he was just as skilled at building peace as he was at winning wars.
He went from being a battlefield commander to a brilliant governor. Just like that.
And he didn't just rule with an iron fist. The records say he used grace and awe, meaning he cracked down hard on corrupt officials but fiercely protected the weak and the vulnerable. He governed so fairly and so well that the local people did something almost unheard of. They built living shrines to honor him while he was still alive. I mean, can you imagine earning that level of respect?
This quote, it tells you everything you need to know about his character. It comes from an old story where a colleague tried to give him a secret gift, a bribe, insisting no one will ever know. And Huang Gai's reply says it all. This wasn't a show for him. That integrity was bone deep. It was just who he was.
All right, so let's go back to that decisive night on the Yangtze River. The plan is in motion. Huang Gai is sailing toward the enemy. The fate of China is literally hanging in the balance. What happens next? And what is the real, lasting impact of this one incredible act of sacrifice?
Huang Gai didn't just dream up the plan. He was in the lead boat. As his fleet, packed with flammable reeds and oil, got close to Cao Cao's armada, he gave the signal. The ships were set ablaze. In the chaos that followed, he was struck by a stray arrow and thrown into the freezing river. He was about to die, anonymous and alone, until one of his own generals happened to hear his voice and pull him from the water. He risked absolutely everything.
The fire attack was a spectacular, catastrophic success. Cao Cao's chained fleet was turned into an inferno. His army was shattered, and his dream of unifying China was gone. And that number you see there, 3? That's the number of kingdoms that would exist because of this victory. Huang Gai's plan didn't just win a battle. It literally shaped the next 60 years of Chinese history.
But maybe his greatest legacy is how his tactic became immortalized. The ruse of self-injury is now a famous idiom in Chinese culture. It's listed as one of the legendary 36 stratagems. Think about that. His plan was so effective, so brilliant, that it became a permanent part of military theory, studied for centuries to come.
So in the end, what's the big takeaway here? We think of weapons as swords and arrows and armies. But the story of Huang Gai reminds us that sometimes the most devastating weapon you can possibly wield is a reputation so solid, a character so unimpeachable, that your enemies simply cannot believe you would ever betray it.